Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. Today I'm going to return to my year-long series on the films of Luis Bunuel. And before I get started on the movie I want to talk about today, I have added another book to my burgeoning collection of Luis Bunuel library. And there's a lot of books available on Bunuel, surprisingly so. This new one is called Bunuel in Mexico, A Crisis of National Cinema. And this focuses on Bunuel's Mexican period, which I have found to be a rich vein of artistic riches from Bunuel. That's Bunuel on the cover there, looking through the lens. That might be Gabriel Figueroa, who the legendary Mexican cinematographer who worked on several of Bunuel's films. So what this book does is give a lot more context. I've only started it, but it will provide hopefully a lot more context of what Mexican cinema was like at the time that Bunuel was making films in Mexico. What kind of films were popular? How Bunuel's films fit into the various genres that he had to work in order to make movies. Now, the film I want to talk about today is called Mexican Bus Ride, and this is the American title, the English language title for Subida al Cielo, which is a mountain in Mexico, which translates to ascend to heaven. Now, the problem with Mexican Bus Ride is that there are no good, there's no streaming copy of the film that has subtitles. Now, on YouTube, there are 3 or 4 copies of this film. They're not good. One of them is, the print is pretty good, but there's no subtitles. Another one, very strangely, has like an English language narration to the film. And the one that has a print that's watchable with no English subtitles, I tried auto translation. This film had that option, and watching a film with auto translation is a kind of humorous journey in itself. But I found as the film went on, it didn't really bother me that much. I was able to. There was a lot of translations that seemed right on and were grammatically correct. A whole bunch of others weren't, but I could get the substance of what was going on. But nevertheless, I still thought, well, you know, who's going to watch this movie? I don't think there's any physical media release available anywhere. It's on eBay, Amazon. It might not have ever had a English language friendly subtitled release. But then there's about a 15-minute prologue to the main action of the film, which is the Mexican bus ride. And once that began, it was so engaging that I just had to watch it to the end. And I can't say that I was that horribly, impeded by this auto translation. So, as I said, there's about a 15-minute prologue here because this film begins in a isolated Mexican village, but a prosperous one. This is not a poverty-stricken because they have coconut trees everywhere, and the main protagonist family has become wealthy and has an estate that's valuable. So the boy's mother is very ill, and the 2 older brothers want to sort of gyp him out of his share of the estate. The mother, however, prefers the younger son. She doesn't like her older children at all. And this is compounded by the fact that the younger son is getting married. There's no church here. This is a very isolated village, isolated by mountains. And so when the marriage, excuse me, when the marriage is ceremony, there's no church, there's no priest. This is sort of a kind of pagan type of village. And one of their customs is when they get married, the young couple consummates their marriage on the marriage night at an island close offshore. And that is the custom that the young son and his new bride are going to go through with. But halfway there on the boat, the two brothers come and they say, "Mother's close to death, you gotta come." When he comes to see his mother, the mother shoos away the others and says, "You have to get a notary, I have to change my will. You need to be provided for, and I don't trust your brothers." So he has to make a perilous trip. Now the marriage has not been consummated, but he has to take, because of the mother's illness, so he has to take a trip on a bus ride. And as I say, once this bus ride begins, this film really takes off. Everything happens on this bus. They don't get very far when a tire blows. Now the son is desperate to get the attorney to come from this location where the bus is traveling to. So everything conspires against him getting there in time to bring him back while his mother's still alive. The mother says, "Don't worry, I'll make it, just get the attorney." And then there's a violent thunderstorm on a treacherous road. A car comes the other direction. The bus needs to be repaired. With all the rain, they come to a river which has no bridge, and they have to cross it, but the water is too high. There's a great sequence at this river as a farmer who is anticipating the trouble the bus might have brings his oxen to pull the bus out of the river, but the oxen don't want to go out of the river. And then his youngest daughter charms the oxen, and very easily the oxen follow her and the bus comes out of the river. Also on board this bus, besides the young man going for a notary, is a various assortment of characters, in particularly the town temptress. And she has been after our young hero from the get-go. She's traveling on the bus. Her aim seems to be basically seducing this young man before he can consummate his marriage. There's a pregnant woman, so we get a birth on this bus. Later on, there's a death. There's a fading politician who talks all kinds of nonsense about how brilliant, his future career is. It's just very much a microcosm of what Mexican society might look like to a Mexican audience. And again, this book that I showed you in its chapter on this film, it does relate some of the situations that Mexican audiences would certainly identify, especially a president from the 1930s named Cardenas, who instituted a lot of land reform and has looked back on nostalgically as the current president of Mexico in 1952, is not so oriented to worry about the class difference and the difference in wealth. And then we get another extraordinary scene, because the bus driver's mother is having an her Saints Day party. So before they get to the town, they have to stop again because we have to go to the party. And the young man goes along with it. Well, this is important, his mother's important, so is the bus driver's mother. And they have this sort of festival fiesta kind of situation with a band and dancing. And then as in the Criminal Life of Archibaldo de la Cruz, a bus of American tourists come by and they stop and they look at at this festival. They're seeing authentic Mexican life. This is the way it is, and they even join in. And it's a very funny sequence, as it was in Archibaldo de la Cruz. And then we do eventually get a scene of seduction, and because the young man takes the bus himself so he can get into town and get the notary, and the bus driver, drunk at his mother's party, he just says, "Yeah, go ahead, take the bus." But the temptress goes along. And then they get stuck in a torrential rainstorm where the young man can't even see in front of him. And of course, the temptress takes advantage of this situation when it's only the two of them on the bus. But in the middle of all this, of all these comical and goings on, and this is a funny film, this is a comedy, we get a fantasy. And this may be the best fantasy in all of Luis Bunuel's work, and where the bus itself in the fantasy becomes like the Garden of Eden. We look from the back of the bus forward and we see a tropical forest, and the temptress in the bus has been peeling an apple. So I mean, she is obviously Eve tempting Adam. But the great part of this fantasy is that the mother and the new wife are suddenly start interchanging with themselves. So he doesn't know who exactly is who anymore. They all seem to meld into one character. So the situation resolves itself in very much of a deceptive way. The lawyer is too old to make the trip back through these mountains, and this seduction, if I forget whether I mentioned it, is filmed. This occurs on this mountain, Subida al Cielo, ascent to heaven. So the young man gets back to his village. It's too late. He has to involve himself in another deception, which is very clever, very cleverly done. And then he's also deceived his wife. He is purported to be a virgin, and he's lost his virginity to the temptress, and not his wife. Of course, she doesn't know that. And they walk on the beach and they stare out into the oceans and in the sky. I told a lot of this story because I'm assuming most people are going to see this movie, but who knows? I mean, this is these Mexican films are so much better than I would have ever anticipated. I saw most of these films before, but so long ago, and now being able to connect these films, these Mexican films that Guillermo del Toro and some other Mexican film historians believe to be better than the European segment of Bunuel's career. And who knows? I mean, these movies are so ripe to be restored, rediscovered, an eclipse at perhaps Bunuel in Mexico, and because they're very important movies. So in 1952, this movie was shown at the Cannes Film Festival, and it won an award of all things for the best avant-garde movie of the year. Bunuel was still considered an avant-gardist for his surrealist movies like L'Âge d'Or back in 1930. And it was a big success in Paris too, at least according to Andre Bazin. I read Bazin's review. Now, only Los Olvidados a couple years earlier had been shown in France, and which also had a couple of fantasy scenes. And Bazin said, "Well, this is the best fantasy scene he's ever encountered in the movies." So again, a film that sadly is going to be difficult to watch. I will leave a link in the description box below to this, to the specific print of Mexican Bus Ride that you can use auto translation if you're curious enough to give it a go. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.